Hello. Okay. Um, so this panel, we'll be talking with Prayaag and Sudeep about their latest books. This one, Sudeep's Fallen City, and which is, I'll read a little from the back. In late August 1978, Geeta and Sanjay Chopra stepped out of their home in a quiet neighborhood in Delhi. Geeta had to record a program at All India Radio. Her younger brother Sanjay accompanied her. The two teenagers disappeared. 4 days later, their disfigured bodies would be found by cowherds in a deserted corner of the ridge, a thickly forested area on the western outskirts of the city. So this is obviously a story about crime, and Prayaag's is different, set in a different time, but in the same city, of course, Delhi. And it's a different kind of book. It's a novel, and for starters, unlike this, which is, of course, non-fiction. And it's called Mother India. And it's set in a very contemporary Delhi with characters who spend a lot of time on social media, sometimes to their own detriment, and as do many of us, I suppose. And so, these are the two books we'll be talking about. And both of them, the first obviously has a lot to do with crime. It is about two murders. The second also has some elements of crime and criminality. And it's a rich sort of genre, I suppose, if you think about crime. Because whether you're thinking about what we read in school, maybe the Hardy Boys or the Nancy Drews or the Three Investigators, or Sherlock Holmes, or Agatha Christie, or Feluda, and crime pays when you write about it. And it's also a rich trove of stories for cinema. And now for Netflix, for or other OTTs. Even the superhero genre, I would hazard, has some elements of crime and criminality, because you can't have a superhero without a supervillain. So you can't have a Batman without a Joker. And so that's the sort of starting thoughts that I'm beginning with. I'll start with Sudeep, and I just, I'd like to ask you, Sudeep, you've written very different books in the past, and this seems to be a departure from previous books in several ways. And so it's always interesting for me as a writer myself to think, what is it that impels another writer to come to a topic and to spend, I don't know how many years this took, but to live with that in your head for so many years. What brought you to this story so many years after this crime happened, 1978? And I don't know, when did you start writing it?
Well, I started writing it relatively recently, but as Samrat mentioned, by the way, hi, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for, and hi back. Thank you for joining us. So yeah, I mean, as Samrat mentioned, I've lived with this story for decades, though I wrote it relatively recently. It is my newest book. So I mean, this is the last book that I wrote. It came out late last year, and I actually finished writing it earlier in 2024. And really got down to writing it in 2023, about an event that took place in 1978. And the narrative arc of the story is actually set from 1975, which is the emergency, to 1984, which is the anti-Sikh riots. And the year that Geeta and Sanjay Chopra, the two siblings, were brutally killed on 26th of August 1978 by people, as it turned out, people that you might come to know as in a hyphenated form, Billa Ranga, Billa and Ranga, but typically Billa hyphen Ranga. And that happened in 1978, right in the middle of that time. And I am of Geeta and Sanjay's generation. And their death, their brutal killing, deeply affected me because Sanjay Chopra was as old as I was at that time. Geeta was 2 years older. And so as school children, I remember that Delhi came to a standstill at that time. There was this conversation across the country about this horrific killing of these two siblings. And we were deeply affected. It stayed with me for many, many years. And I think it's sort of a catharsis in a way that I've managed to write about it now. And using sort of a writerly approach, Samrat and Prayaag, you would know this well, and many of us in the audience, is that a book has its time. It has its dynamic. It has its own rhythm and time. Maybe I didn't have the mind space for the book before. I knew what to write. I knew how I would write it. I knew what research it would entail, not just reliving sense memories, which I did in a way by actually walking through Delhi hundreds of kilometers on foot, as you would walk. See, that's an unnecessary use of language. On foot, walking, So I clearly need a good editor at this point of time. That's another story. But it needed to rekindle, I needed to rekindle sense memories. So it needed archival research, it needed a lot of other things. Short point, I knew and how the mechanics of the book would turn out to be. But you need the mind space as well for a book like this, which is deeply troubling, and I would sort of stop and break down every few chapters because I just couldn't contain the emotion anymore. So it was very, very cathartic. So I think its time is now. And as this is a question that will come inevitably later, so let me presume the question and get rid of it now as a logical extension, is that I found that it made sense to write about it even today because it's, after all, a slice of life. It's a slice of history. And it is located in a time in India's history, which is very fascinating. Because it's not just that the children died, they died at a time when India was literally on edge. Indira Gandhi was deposed. Before that, the emergency had been declared, which completely upset the idea of the Republic of India completely. The Janta government came into power, which was a bit of a, to use French, it was a bit of a shit show. And there was this complete circus of cast of characters. Morarji Desai was Prime Minister, his son was being accused of being corrupt, Jagjeevan Ram was Defense Minister, his son was embroiled in a sex scandal, which some of you might remember. And there was a great doubt in the idea of India and also the integrity of India. And soon after that, you had Mrs. Gandhi coming back to power, Sanjay Gandhi dying in an accident, and the horrific anti-Sikh riots after Operation Blue Star. So it was a moment in India's time, in Delhi's time, where Delhi, which is used to being literally at its nadir from time to time, those of you who are history buffs will know my pun, it seemed truly to be falling even lower in its sort of psychological space. It seemed to me to be a fallen city, and that's how the name came out. So that's how I've located the book. But to conclude my point, it's taken all these years to finally wrap my head around it and write it.
So you've done a great job, Sudeep. I mean, that reconstruction, it's terrific. It's details which just completely bring alive that particular time, those days. Details like whether it was raining or not raining on that particular day. And, details of intimate details, like absolutely terrific details. So that's really great. And I read it pretty much at one go, as I did Prayaag's, which I read at one sitting. And Prayaag's is called Mother India, as we know. And the name in Sudeep's case needed a bit of sort of coming to, but in Prayaag's case, the coming to that title is very direct in a certain sense. And it's, its central character is somebody who is named Mayank, who works with a right-wing influencer making videos. And that's also very contemporary and very interesting. So can you please tell us a little more about the book and the central character?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Samrat. And thank you all for coming. So the book actually, is, I suppose it's very different from non-fiction. I've never attempted non-fiction of your length. But, you know, with fiction, the idea sort of comes to you in stages. You know, you start out, at least for me, I start out with the characters, and I had these two characters in mind. My book has two central protagonists. There's Mayank, who works for this YouTuber. He works for a right-wing YouTuber, and he makes, you know, he's asked to make a meme. He's asked to make a video in support of one of the this chap Kashyap's channel, and so he uses an image of a girl that he finds on Instagram, he finds on the internet, and he uses her face for a video about Mother India. So, you know, it's Bharat Mata, they're doing a video about Bharat Mata, and so he picks up her photo and he inputs it into like an AI kind of mid-journey kind of program, and that becomes, that sort of sets their lives spinning into various things. And so the story was kind of it's a fictional examination of very much, I think, you know, reality today. There are, I mean, it's happening all the time. Just the other day, there was a piece in The Guardian written by someone about how her voice was used by, you know, by someone. So more and more, our voices, our visuals, you know, parts of ourselves are being taken in and brought into, you know, are being utilized in kind of this kind of internet theater. And, you know, I don't know how exactly I came to this idea, but I had these, you know, first it was the characters that I started with, and I knew that Nisha works at a kind of a chocolatier at a mall, a high-end chocolatier. So she's, you know, something like it's a Japanese company that she works, and she sells chocolate there at this mall. And so for me, I was looking at the kind of internet economy, but also, you know, the new kind of glitz of that whole mall, you know, the mall shop front, which is also, I think, very much, you know, kind of contrived or artificial in some senses, like the internet. And so both artificial and very real. And so I wanted to write about these two things, and sort of when they came together in the way that they did in the book, that's when I knew I could, you know, I had something to write about. And I think with, you know, as you were saying about Delhi itself, you know, with Delhi, Delhi was certainly the place I wanted to base the novel. It seemed like it was.
Why?
Well, I grew up in Delhi, and I'm very fond of the city. I haven't lived in Delhi for many years, actually. I left about more than a decade ago, but somehow it exists in my mind as very much like I can't seem to get out, stop writing about it. So, you know, it's a very fascinating city because there's so many things happening. There's so many people from all over the country there. It's a city of migrants. It's a city of insiders and outsiders. And Mayank belongs to a community called, he's a Jat. So he comes from a small, like it's, in Delhi we have these things called urban villages, which are kind of these zones that were within the larger city. Like we have places called Khirki Gaon, and we have Masoodpur, and we have Mahipalpur, and things like that. And all these places are kind of, they were just allowed to grow as these little pockets of, you know, that were meant to be rural life in the middle of the city. And so he lives in one of these, and they're actually like kind of abandoned zones. The government doesn't provide water, they don't provide electricity and things like that. They're all kind of left to their own devices. So I was very interested in writing about that geography. And Mayank comes from one of these places, and you know, he's a kind of original inhabitant of Delhi in that sense. And Nisha's an outsider. And so for me to bring those two lives together in some way was what I was trying to explore.
Okay. Well, Sudeep mentioned his you know, walking through the city for hundreds of kilometers. And I mean, we can see the research there, you know, so the archival research and the court records and all of that. How did you do yours? Did you also leg it through Mahipalpur and...
A few times, yeah. So I actually grew up in Gurgaon, and my school was in this place called Vasant Kunj. I used to drive through all the time, you know, on the bus or whatever. And so I saw this landscape change actually in front of my eyes. It started out as this place of like kind of village shops. You know, I could stop there and buy like a chocolate or something and pay the person at the end of the week. You know, that kind of, it was very much like old sort of village. This I'm talking about the 90s. And then by the time I finished school, it was, you know, outlet malls had started opening. And then the airport opened up right next to it. And now there are like, you know, sort of backpacker cafes, and that it's had all these transformations. It's become a tech hub now. So it's had these various transformations, and almost none in service of the people who live there. It's almost always for the, you know, the larger city, the needs of the larger city. So the people who actually, you know, live there and created that are the people whose kind of needs are almost never addressed. You know, it's always the other people, the outsiders, who are kind of being provided for by this, by the economic activity there. So it became something that I became very interested in writing about.
Okay. Sudeep, yours is of course from a, you know, several decades ago, an older time in the history of Delhi.
I'm an older person as well.
So, you know, this whole sense of Delhi as a gritty city. Now, you've written, of course, that it's the, what is 7 or 9 cities of Delhi through time, through the ages, that it's always been that sort of place. Can you tell us a little bit more about that from that sort of perspective, the long-term perspective, as it were?
Well, indeed, and I mean, Delhi's been a living city and a lived city for centuries. It's in its 9th iteration right now. As we know it, it might go through a 10th. There have been many Delhis over the centuries. And without launching into sort of a pedantic history lesson, it's something that we've come to see from the pre-Islamic times, you know, the times of Lal Kot to, you know, you have the times when the sultanates began to develop in Delhi. You have the old city, you have Siri, you have Shahjahanabad. In between, you have other cities coming up. You have Lachins, so-called Lachins, Delhi, New Delhi, and you will have other iterations of Delhi as Delhi grows and Delhi evolves. I mean, that's the way Delhi has been. So I find it a very fascinating city, and I've spent 25 years in Delhi from the time that I came to Delhi for my university, and never really left because I began working there. And it's a city that I grew to deeply love and deeply hate. I can't stand Delhi, and I'm absolutely besotted by Delhi. In fact, in my book, I even quote Khushwant Singh, who wrote a very lovely little, charming, completely oddball book called Delhi. And there is this prostitute called Bhagmati, and you know, he talks about Delhi is truly loved by, you know, those who must love Delhi must also love the ugliness of Delhi. You know, and maybe that is the obsession, the level of obsession that I come from. And I found Khushwantji's book, Delhi, which I read from, you know, just to bring alive the sense memories of my gritty, grotty, groveling, grovelly, gravely, and grand and great and gorgeous Delhi, all of it. So, I mean, that's the kind of dynamic that I share with Delhi. And I mean, I've written it. I call it a love-hate city. It's in black and white. It's in print. It's hyphenated like Billa and Ranga. Love-hate city. And so I engage with the city in that way. And the tragic incident of Geeta and Sanjay Chopra's murder, and you know, it's sort of, and that's the Delhi is exposed at that point of time. As I'll just take a couple of minutes, if I may, to just expand this horizon. Exposed to me, brought back to me memories and sense memories of a Delhi that was remarkable in its situation. Of course, it was New Delhi, and you know, sort of government was there, parliament was there, but it was the Janta government in 1978. And it was a remarkable kind of situation. Morarji Desai was prime minister. He was already being undercut by his own colleagues. The Janta government was shaky. That was also a coalition government in which sort of the predecessors of today's ultra-right wing or the alt-right in India were part of that government. The Jan Sangh was part of the government. Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the foreign minister of India. And there were these fascinating things that came about. And let me just give you one jhalak, as we say back in the north. I'm the only North Indian makedi roti, sarson ka saag, Hindi-speaking Bengali that I know, speaking to you as I am in Kolkata at this point of time. So let me fly with this. And Atal Bihari Vajpayee decided to, because those of you might recall this and some friends who do not recall that time, Delhi came to an absolute standstill with the death of these children. There were students, Sanjay Chopra was a student of modern school. There were children of a naval officer, Madan Mohan Chopra, and Roma Chopra, his wife. By the way, Roma Chopra just passed away last 23rd of October. May she finally rest in peace because she lost 2 of her children so brutally and never really got over it. Who can? Atal Bihari Vajpayee waded into this massive discontent that erupted across Delhi. Parliament came to a standstill. Children from modern school and the colleges of Delhi converged on Boat Club, which is no longer a place of protest. It's been done away with. But in those days, it was. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, being a bit of the diva that he was, and very, very conscious of this fact that he was a brilliant speaker, an orator, decided to play diplomat to the government of India and waded into this crowd of protesting and outraged students, class 8, 9, 10, 11 students, college students of every ilk from all across Delhi, from Dayal Singh College, from Vivekanand College, from Lady Shri Ram College, from every place across Delhi you can imagine. They all converged on Boat Club in their thousands, demanding justice and accountability. Atal Bihari Vajpayee goes into this with his trademark thing, and because he thinks he can solve everything, and the soapbox, the pulpit that he has is a jeep, because a police jeep, because there's nothing else there. And he gets up with a police megaphone and begins to talk, and somebody hits him with a, there's a brick bat on his forehead, there's a gash. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, being a bit of the drama queen that he was from time to time, goes to Willingdon Hospital, which is now called Ram Manohar Lohia Hospital, and bandaged with blood spatters on his kurta, walks into Lok Sabha. And of course there's a complete commotion, and Lok Sabha is again brought to standstill, and this man, I think, just loves it. So he lays back with a bandaged forehead, blood spattered, and there's a debate on law and order in India and how dare people attack the foreign minister of India. Congress walon ne kya hoga? So there was immediately a conspiracy theory. So interesting, amazing things were happening. I mean, these children were dead and just about cremated. But it seemed that they'd become they were being co-opted by the circus that also is Delhi. So it was just a fascinating thing that I looked at. So I look at Delhi very, very viscerally. It is the capital of India, but it's also absolutely criminal. And you can feed in as many puns as you want on that.
Gritty city, because I really want to question that a little bit. Reason being, you've written about Northeast India, you've written about the Maoist belt. And if you think about violence, just sheer, things that go down, that can happen. And the scale and levels of violence, I would argue, in, say, for example, Manipur right now are of something, in Imphal. Of course, Imphal is not Delhi, very much not Delhi, but the scale is something else altogether. And, so it's not like, is it a Delhi thing or is it that it happens everywhere? Because crime, okay, you're talking big cities, let's talk crime. Bangalore, software capital and all of that, but I lived there and I still have these memories just from the one building that I lived in, where one day in the afternoon we walked out and found 2 people walking off with the iron gate because the prices of iron had apparently gone up. In the afternoon, they've just unbolted the gate and they're taking it away. My downstairs neighbors, a family of very large people, were surprised by a thief jumping onto their first floor balcony, and then all these large people stood up and the thief escaped. But so crime is everywhere. So
you do realize we're speaking in Kolkata, right? We're right now in Kolkata. I'm just checking. I'm just putting it out there.
Right.
Yeah. I just thought I should mention.
Jump in there one second. Because since you mentioned Calcutta, I mean, I have a very vivid memory of when I was born in Calcutta and I lived here till I was about 8 or 9, and I have a very vivid memory of before reading the newspapers about this kind of, in the 80s, late 80s, there was this guy who was going on called Stone Man.
Yeah, I remember that.
These Stone Man murders. It was shocking now that I think back to it, because, it was a kind of class-based kind of violence. He was going on and killing homeless people sleeping on the street and, smashing their heads open with rocks, I suppose, from what I remember. And, you know, that's a really gritty, gruesome serial killing. You know, that's one of, I suppose, one of India's early serial killers or first serial killers or whatever. So I don't think any, you know, any aggregation of human beings can be not gritty. You know, like we are kind of, you know, you get to this kind of size of you know, communities, you're going to have violence. You're going to have this underbelly of crime and hatred and rage against one another. And you know, there's no getting away from it, apart from like moving to Goa or something like that.
Which
both
both of us
successfully done.
Which both of us have done, by the way.
And
But don't you dare join us. We need the space.
and of course, there's the other thing also, which is the opposite of crime, which is, or so it seems, is punishment and policing. And that brings me. Okay, you are, yeah,
Sorry.
okay, sure.
But even Goa, you know, it's like an imagined ideal. Like you kind of, there's this imagination that it's very peaceful and it is very beautiful and all of that. But there is a crazy undercurrent of violence that happens there. You know, you see it. There's violence against each other. You know, within the Goan community, there's violence against outsiders. Just the other day, yesterday, I got a news report on, you know, on Instagram or something about a truck driver being lynched after, you know, there was a small accident and the villagers sort of followed him and tied him to the front of this Jeep, you know, and they lynched him. And, you know, that's in Goa. So there's nothing that is like, it's human beings. It's not even the size of the community, you know. That's the sad part.
Sudeep?
No, but and all true, absolutely all true. But I think we get this, the way we chroniclers or we writers or we historians or storytellers, if you will, sutradhars even. I think we come upon these stories or these instances of which is sort of global in its outlook and global in the way the incidents of this nature happens, the way violence is sort of all consuming in so many ways. But I think even so, there are certain characters, there are certain instances, there are certain times and moments in history, freeze frames, which allow us to sort of zoom in and zoom out, which my good friend Ruchir was talking about in a previous session, zooming in and zooming out. It allows us to pan, to zoom in, to zoom out, to use cinematic phrasing, to use an incident, to use a person, to use a time in history, to tell a larger story, for an emotional connect, or a historical information, or a cultural brief, or just a crackling good story, which Prayaag has done, and I hope more power to you, keep doing. So, and please, if I may push my book a little bit, I've tried to tell a crackling story as well. I mean, we should be we're shameless writers. There's no shame in writing, and there's no shame in pushing your own book. So I think that is also important. So I think Delhi spoke to us in the way that it did, and as Delhi has spoken to so many other writers and historians over time, including Khushwant Singh, whose name I just took a little while ago. And I think that is the fascinating part. So that's how you get the subgenre of city stories. You'll have so Prayaag's book and my book, I can guarantee you, will be soon slotted in the Delhi city section books in Bari Sons and in Fakir Chand and in some other store. Like in Oxford, there are Calcutta books and there are Bengal books. So there are these moments, Samrat.
Why don't you read a bit?
Do you want to go first? Do you want to? No, I mean, I've just spoken quite a lot. I think Prayaag has a fair run. So why don't Prayaag go first?
I'll read a little bit.
And Prayaag's is, of course, much more contemporary, as I've said earlier, and it's the Delhi that we see when we go there now.
So, as I said, one of the things I was interested in examining is how the city has changed a lot over the last 20 years. And as you know, Sudeep was also talking about it, but it's kind of layers upon layers that you see, and that's how cities transform. Not Calcutta so much. It seems the same as when I was a kid in some ways. But, you know, Delhi especially has had these very radical transformations. And, you know, it was always very interesting to me as a writer. So, I'll just read a little section where Mayank is, like Sudeep, he's walking through the city. He's just actually come out of a police station. He was wrongfully or rightfully arrested, picked up by the cops. And so he spent a night in at the station, and he's kind of looking at himself and feeling very angsty about his own life and where the choices he's made. And so he's walking. And Delhi is not actually a walker-friendly city at all. It's not built for walking. The distances are very far and things like that. But if you do walk, it's very rewarding. So at the crossing of Vasant Kunj and Nelson Mandela Marg, where last night Sushil and he sat under the flyover and drank, he saw for the first time a green sign advertising a climbing center and was briefly mystified. He should have turned right for home. He'd had barely any sleep, but instead he took a left, crossing a management school and a South Indian restaurant, and then the shuttered shops of Masoodpur Market, the unlit signs promising underwear, bathroom tiles, physics foundation courses. This stretch of road, the small shops and eateries of Masoodpur Market, reminded him of what his own village, Mahipalpur, had looked like when he was a boy. It was strange to think about. A long time ago, well before he was born, sometime in his father's youth most likely, both these urban villages had been bisected by the same road, the 4-lane Vasant Kunj Road. In both villages, the people who owned land along the road had become rich, left the farm life behind, joined the new world, starting their own businesses or selling ancestral parcels. Mahipalpur just happened to fall on the side close to the Gurgaon highway and the sprawling new airport. This meant that his own village had changed far faster in appearance, changed a few times in fact. When he was a boy, he would obtain sweets and Pepsi on credit from the store creepers along the main road. Now there were backpacker cafes, outlet stores, massage parlors, nightclubs like the one Bhavna went to. Maybe his life would have been very different if his family had been from Masoodpur. He felt grateful that modernity had blessed him in this way, blessed them all. He'd been walking a long time. The orange toffee sun had lain a tincture of sweat upon his skin. In the distance, at Andheri Amor, he could see the boxy white metro station, a next transformation already underway. Recently, he'd read in the news that the government had purchased a special boring machine to create perhaps the country's widest tunnel, a large section of it passing directly underneath his ancestral village. 6 lanes of cars would travel many kilometers, diving in at the junction he just left and emerging at the giant statue of Lord Shiva along the highway. It would really help with the traffic, Mayank thought, which turned malevolent every morning and evening, even on weekends. Maybe some of the shops and businesses that had come up to serve the big car folk would now close. Maybe some businesses that better serve their own community would once again open. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Prayaag. Yeah, so some parts of the city have changed a lot and some parts have changed not so much. One part of the city which has not changed so much is probably central Delhi, around Gol Dak Khana, which is one of the places central to Sudeep's story. And another, of course, is Tihar Jail. And so, Sudeep, if you can please read a bit from that part.
You need to indulge me a little on this. It's slightly longer than the passage that Prayaag read out. My apologies. But it needs a little more contextualizing. So this is towards the end of the book. It's from a chapter called Ninth Life, when Billa and Ranga have already been, sort of, the death sentence by hanging has been confirmed and reconfirmed many times, but they keep appealing and it keeps going up and down the ladder of justice. But it is now finally decided that they will be hanged, and there's no going back. And that finality came after a bit of a constitutional crisis. Billa and Ranga created a mini constitutional crisis where Billa and Ranga's defense lawyers actually questioned the power of the president for clemency. So they actually brought in a bit of a tussle between the judiciary, executive, and the legislature, and so on and so forth. And it was a bit of a run around, and it took several weeks to sort out. So a murder also had repercussions that we don't always realize in our own way. So here they're about to be executed the day after, and another landmark thing happened is that a bunch of journalists, 5 of them, wanted to interview Billa and Ranga. And of course the authorities denied it. because this had never been permitted in India. And Prabha Dutt, was the mother of the journalist Barkha Dutt, actually took a public interest petition to the Supreme Court and got special permission to be able to interview Birla and Ranga. They were given 30 minutes, and along her shoulders, and on her shoulders, 4 other journalists came along as well, including somebody I admire greatly, Usha Rai. Prabha and Usha Rai were the sort of the journalists, the female journalists of their generation, leaders in many, many ways. Anyway, so this chapter talks about their interaction with Birla and Ranga, because that's really what consumed us. And ironically, Birla, Ranga we remember in a hyphenated form or not, but we hardly remember the children they killed. And that is an irony that never ceases to escape me. Anyway, here we go. Journey with me. And we are now in Tihar jail, the other geographical location that Samrat spoke of. So the children were abducted around Golda Khana, which is in central Delhi, and this scene is set in Tihar jail, the other name. So I'll just read excerpts from the chapter because it's a bit long. A cat, they say, has 9 lives. Prabha Dutt wrote in the weekend edition of Hindustan Times on 31st January 1982, a Sunday. Birla, or the one with the cat's eyes, having given the hangman's noose a slip half a dozen times, will finally be hanged till he dies at the Phasi Koti in Tihar jail tomorrow morning. So will Ranga, his partner in crime. Dutt's article was datelined the 30th, the day earlier, in the usual newspaper format. It ran on the front page in column 8, the column on the extreme right, by a large 4-column photo of Ranga's relatives huddled outside the gates of Tihar. As with this newspaper, the convicts made front page news with every paper of note across the country, as they had always done. Every twist and turn of their fate, the same as the horrific fate of their victims, kept pace with both the mundane and the remarkable. And here I talk about sort of the parallel universe of Delhi and India that follows, including Mr. Shahi, the Pakistani foreign minister, visiting Delhi, and there was a flap about F-16 fighter planes being given to Pakistan. India was looking for the Jaguar. All kinds of things were happening. Anyway, back at the ground zero of Tihar, there was way less sophistry than the world outside. Indeed, there was a sense of finality. Much as it seemed to be a surprise that, with the notoriety attached to the murder, people had actually arrived and claimed Ranga as family, nobody showed up for Birla. And here they were, Dutt, Rai, that's Usha Rai, Patra, that's Prakash Patra, who was with the United News of India at that point of time, and he went, and their colleagues for a 30-minute hard-won chat with Birla at the Phasi Koti, the so-called hanging house to which he and Ranga had been shifted a week or so earlier. The scaffold from which they would drop to their deaths was in the same complex. 30 minutes with Birla only, because Ranga wasn't interested in spending 30 minutes with journalists. He had conveyed this to his jailers, and the jail authorities had conveyed this to a small group of media persons. The journalists trooped into Tihar for their interaction with Birla. Birla was all jittery bravado, and Dutt caught the mood that HT announced with the headline, "Trembling legs betray Birla on death's eve." That mood was diluted with an opposite tone in a secondary headline that carried the story to the back page, page 16. Birla laughs on death's eve. As it happens, both moods were true. Here was a twitchy convict with a last throw at showing off and nervous about the news that would kill him in some hours. The hanging of Birla was scheduled for 8 a.m. on 31st January. Ranga's execution was scheduled for an hour later. There would have to be a queue because there was one scaffold at Tihar. Years later, at her home in a quiet, leafy enclave in Gurgaon, and I call it Gurgaon because when I met her, it was still Gurgaon, and I refused to call it Gurugram. Sue me, ladies and gentlemen, I don't care. Leafy enclave in Gurgaon, just across the border from New Delhi, Usha Rai would recall that exchange. It was an October morning in 2019, more than 40 years after Geeta and Sanjay were abducted and killed. We were taking tea at a dining table, a young German shepherd restlessly circling us, protective of Rai, as she collected her thoughts about all those many years ago, and specifically about the impression of bravado versus the physicality that Birla presented. Birla was not a big man. Rai seemed surprised by the fact, even decades later, of a person so slight and yet capable of containing such abundant violence. He was a tiny, puny man, she told me. Birla was jittery, and that eclipsed the bonhomie with which he greeted Dutt and her colleagues. He had even written letters to some, including Dutt. He'd written her a postcard. Birla led with a ready confession of having killed 5 or 6 times, all committed on impulse, as he shared with some nonchalance, except for the killing of his friend Sudhir. Who Sudhir was, nobody knew. That was premeditated, he clarified. He thought Sudhir would snitch to the police, so Sudhir had to be killed. 5 or 6 murders. Dutt attempted to corroborate it with whatever chatter Birla had shared with the jail attendants. They said he had admitted to having committed 6 or 7 murders. You know how we say 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, 6, 7, so 8, 9, it's all good. Maybe more, he had suggested. So there we go, 7, 8, 8, 9. What about the murder of Sanjay and Geeta? Asked Dutt. This is Prabhadar. And Birla says, I will take that truth with me. Why are your legs trembling? Rai then asked. Not at all, he shot back. But he couldn't mask the nervous laughter that escaped the protestation. And I'll skip a bit and I'll just share with you Birla's responses to the question. I think that is interesting in a ghoulish manner, but it just brings to us the mind of the murderer, if you will, who's about to himself be killed, executed. So he was very nervous. I spoke to Prakash about it as well. I tried to revisit many people who were there at the time, Prakash being one. So, and Prakash recalled to me this sort of Hindi movie dialogue, as we call them, that Birla was sharing with him, like, Birla kisi se darta nahi, you know, Birla ko kisi se parwa nahi. And this is what he was saying in Tihar. And Birla ko kisi se parwa nahi, sirf Rab ke siwai. He's just scared of God, and that's it. And doesn't give a damn about anything. And Prakash said that you just took one look at him and you knew that he was the killer. And yet, Prakash himself admitted to me that in the beginning, he couldn't believe that these bumbling, awkward murderers would pull off this crime of the decade, as far as Delhi was concerned, which brought the country to a standstill. You know, so that's how it will. And they asked him about if he's going to eat tonight, that night. He said, yes, I will eat tonight also, not a problem. And instead of wealth, his dialogue, Hindi movie dialogue, his last line I'll tell you was, instead of wealth, I got death. Now you can't get more Bollywood than that. So I just thought I'd share a bit of that thing with you. There are lots of these conversations, and as I'm sure Prayaag has well. Thank you. And my apologies for taking a little longer than I thought I would. Good man. As to quote Sadat Hasan Manto, or to paraphrase him, good man the Laltin. Good.
Thanks, Sudeep. And I think audience is already in the conversation, so it's probably, we have about 7 minutes left. It's probably time to open it up anyway. So I'll just close with a few concluding remarks that, you know, I mean, like I said, I read both of these books pretty much in one sitting each. They're page turners. And of course, while they're very interesting reads, but I think you get a sense that there are a lot of other layers that these stories have. And whether it is about slightly historical or the very contemporary, but they are talking about realities of Delhi and of India that are very, very relevant. And questions, I mean, we can, for example, right at the end, the bit that Sudeep just read from, you know, the death penalty, and we could have an hour-long debate just about that. So yeah, so do pick up these books, and if you have any questions, we have about 6 minutes left. So, but please, Sudeep has in a previous session expressed his violent urges towards people who make long-winded remarks. So please try and ask specific questions aimed and say who they're, you know, meant for. There. There's one.
Hi, Prayaag. You must have recognized me.
Absolutely. Hi. So nice to see you.
Yes, as soon as I saw your name in the book face, I couldn't resist but come.
Thank you so much for coming, man. This
Actually,
is my former physics teacher, Mrs. Dattagupta. So thank you so much for coming. It's really
you're
nice.
welcome.
Yeah.
I've seen Prayaag growing up. He was a little baby when he came to our school in Vasant Valley. And as both of you spoke, I have lived through all of this in Delhi. I was there right from Geeta Chopra, that murder thing. And when Prayaag came as a student, little baby, and passed out from our school, and I was the head of that school, and I can't believe that you are such a great writer and sitting
it's-
down here.
Thank you so much for coming, ma'am. It's really a pleasure.
Fantastic, fantastic memory.
And
Ma'am,
you know, actually, that our school was on the periphery of this neighborhood that I'm talking about. So we, you know, you saw it right
I
up
saw it
front.
growing
yeah,
up,
absolutely right
yeah.
up front. Yeah, it is.
I saw the whole change as you described from Gurgaon Drive, and
Yeah, absolutely.
I used to go from JNU through that
Yeah, yeah.
Aravalli Hills and all that.
It's very different now. I don't know if you go back to
I
Delhi.
have
or
been-
not.
I have
Yeah,
been
it's
there.
Shocking.
I've been there 35 years of Vasant Valley.
Yeah.
I went there at that time.
Oh, right.
So I'll talk to you afterwards.
Of course. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Sudeep Chakravarti. Thank you. And very, very engrossed reading and what you did, what you described. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Would anyone have any questions for the authors? Okay. Looks like not. So
Thanks so much
So-
for this, Samrat. Thank you for reading the books with so much attention and doing such a great job with the session. Thanks a lot. It was very fun.
thank you.
Any other questions you have?
I do actually. There was a little something that I was wondering
Yeah,
about.
exactly. Go ahead.
Yeah. Which is, your characters, they're sort of, they're working, doing, sort of food delivery guy turned somebody who's making memes, somebody who's working in a store. Their cultural references are very Western, very contemporary. The class, is it that Westernization has now gotten deeper than before,
Absolutely.
or is it still a class thing? Because we remember those issues and those debates about language and the association of language and culture with class.
So, I teach at a university, I teach undergraduates now, creative writing. And so I meet a lot of 19, 20-year-olds, 18, 19, 20-year-olds. And, this is in South India, in Andhra Pradesh. And a lot of the students, some of them, not a lot, but some of them are from like first-generation English speakers. They come from Andhra, Malayali families, speak Malayalam mostly, or Tamil. And but the kind of level of the westernization in terms of how they dress, in terms of how they think, in terms of how the cultural references they can summon. It's not only a westernization. It's interesting because there's also a kind of Easternization in that they're really into manga and Japanese culture and all of that. So there's both these. I mean, there is this kind of, what I mean is there is a kind of external gaze that they have, and it's not like it was in our time, so possibly in the 90s when you're growing up, when, you had like, we used to watch Friends and things like that and read Archie comics and then get like little glimpses of American culture and, crave that kind of culture and want to be like that or whatever. But here I find that a lot of them are already having conversations with people abroad. In their teen years, they've opened up communications, or they're interested in something and they're talking on blogs with people in America, with people in the West, with people in the East. And so there's much more of a kind of equal footing, I would say, between the West and East now. And it's not as divergent as it used to be in our time. And the cultures aren't as kind of polarized as it used to be, I think. That was the sense I got, and I tried to give that to my characters.
No, I endorse what Prayaag is saying. There's a question over there, please. Because I'm at a university in Ahmedabad, and I second everything Prayaag is saying. Completely. Yeah, absolutely.
Westernization, I think, is very superficial in our society, even among the elite professional classes. The real problem, if you agree, I would like to know whether you agree with me, and if you can even dream of a distant solution, is urbanization, industrialization, and the problems it creates in the breakup of the great Indian family. There's no control of the young 18-year-old migrant from a distant rural area coming to the big city in Delhi, where he doesn't know a soul. He can't indulge in any sexual or even romantic reality, because there's no sanctified institution where boy meets girl innocently. Doesn't exist. The age at marriage has been raised. So there's no outlet for this frustration among boys. With girls, it's a little easier. Not only that, religion, the rituals in rural society at home, today's Ekadeshi, ye nahi khana, ye nahi karna, all that discipline out of the window. The guy is totally lost. You will have rangas and billas and characters like that. You will have a very disenchanted population. What is to be done with it? About it? Nobody is thinking about it.
Well, difficult to disagree with the core of your point, ma'am. Urbanization and the way urbanization has happened, or the urban explosion. Look at us. We're in a park, but look at the sound. Look at the people. Look at the crush around us. This is to use a little Shakespearean thing, this is a veritable bubble. But that's where we're in it, but the chaos around us swirls. Similarly, of course, in Delhi or any other place. I mean, it is increasingly more of a pressure cooker situation. But I don't know if I can outright say that people are not considering these issues. I see very much that actually, in a sort of a pleasant counterpoint, that people. It says time up in big red capital letters in front of us, but we are journalists by training. We don't really care about these things. We carry on. So we plow on. So I think I find younger people of today far more aware of the chaos around us, and this runs contrary to the sort of mobile phone generation and so on and so, the screen generation. But they do. I see so many people who care about saying, look what you guys have done to us. We got to get out of this. And I think some enlightened policymakers and practitioners, urban planners, for instance, are thinking about this, but I think it's getting lost in this grand swell of let's move on. Who gives a damn? We got to survive. And it's getting lost in that rhetoric, and it's getting lost in that logic of pure survival and a sort of a orderly disorder, to paraphrase my good friend Sanjeev Barua. So I don't know. I mean, it's something that I think we need to keep talking about, but also act upon it. So absolutely, madam.
Quick.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Just to, I did agree with a lot of what you said and the substance, as Sudeep said, but one sort of qualification perhaps would be that, to look at migrants only through that lens, migrants to a city like Delhi, so many people are coming in. One of my characters is a migrant. She comes from Uttarakhand and, from the Bhimtal region, she's working and I think that to look at migrants only through that lens of perhaps criminality or violence or, frustration even is, doing a lot of people an injustice, because a lot of people are there to make the best lives for themselves, to make the best lives for their families. They pine for home in different ways, They don't honestly want to be there in some squalid PG, when they've left a lovely kind of home behind and all of that. So, I mean, I would just say that like a lot of that criminality comes from the city itself. It comes from the people who've been born and raised in the city, and we need to. I mean, I don't know if it's reductive or what to look at only the migrants, as the source of that anger, that seething anger that we do see in the city, And so that would be my only qualification there.
Thank you very much. Like Sudeep said, we have this thing saying time up, so we've run out of time, but I enjoyed the conversation. I hope you did too. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you.